This episode is brought to you exclusively by Amika, my favorite kind of episode. Amika, I initially found their hair care products when Beth knocked on my dressing room door in 2020 and gave me full-size products that I had to buy an extra luggage piece to check because I was not going to let them go to waste, and I've been hooked ever since. So many of you have talked about your obsession with whether it's the Superfood Star hair oil or the Soul Food Nourishing Mask or recently the Frizz Me Not. My God, this stuff is saving my life. It is so humid here, and their products are just amazing. But I'll tell you more about those later. I also want to highlight Normcore shampoo and conditioner because as a Normcore person, I don't even know if I know what Normcore means. I am a normal person. It just is one of my favorite product duos of theirs. In addition to the Perk Up Dry shampoo, of course, so many things. But for now, I just wanted to remind you not only that they have 11 collections to ensure there are options for all hair types, textures, and styles, and to go on their website to check out what hair type you have. If you aren't sure what products will work for you, you can also look at my faves on loveamika.com/BeThereIn5. And right now, Amika is giving Be There in 5 listeners a one-time use code of 15% off your first order. That is 15% off. Go to my page at loveamika.com/BeThereIn5 and use code BeThereIn5 at checkout. That's loveamik.com/BeThereIn5, code BeThereIn5 to get 15% off your first order. Thanks to Amika for supporting the show. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Be There in 5 podcast. I'm Kate Kennedy, your host. I hope you had a great weekend. I have a lovely guest today, which thank God, because can you imagine if I had to fill this space talking about my own life? I mean, maybe at one point. But you know what I do think it's kind of funny? Okay, so many influencers and podcasters were just at Con, for example. Can? I feel like Con is influencer Con. You know, it's like a place. I think all that goes on there is that Spotify has a boat party and it hopefully invites you on it. I'm not sure. It's something with advertisers and brands. But a lot of influencers go and a lot of podcasters go. And while I would like to express that I will do a panel about anything, anytime, so call me, I also think that when influencers go to influencer-related things that kind of help strengthen their job, when their job is ultimately appealing to, entertaining, and trying to contribute and add value to their own audience, right? And in the vast majority of most people's audiences are normal people. And I'm like, what is it doing for normal people watching you do cool shit all the time? In the name of, you know what I mean? At a point, I'm like, there's just so many events and so many see and be seen things. And while I'm dying for a ticket to Revolve Fest, or I want to go to Coachella or Con or these places to just almost fly on the wall, observe, and then come back to you guys and gossip about it, which I gather isn't what most brands want to pay to have people do. I don't know, you guys. Maybe I'm just jealous, but no, I am just jealous because I just spent 40 minutes cleaning out a water table, and it was not the first time this week. Okay, Water Table Nation. I'm new to this, and do we just accept that they're disgusting? I rinse it off. I try to clean it. It always has a thick coating of slime. I was looking at it today. I'm like, is it sprouting? How is it? It's plastic. I just don't know if I should obsessively be cleaning it all the time, or if we as parents just at a point need to let our kids thrive. To quote Dr. Becky, who is just on every podcast and in every video ever on my feed all the time, reminding me that my kids need to be resilient and basically that I'm doing everything wrong. I'm sure she's lovely. But this concept of your kids shouldn't be comfortable. They need to be resilient. Meanwhile, Teddy, I cruise him around the neighborhood in a miniature white Land Rover, which is the car I would want. But, my husband and everybody ever I talked to was like, oh, so much maintenance. Why? I don't even know that I care. I just want one. And I push him around his Land Rover. He has a portable fan on the Land Rover. It has a shade on top of it. It's 95 degrees. There's not a comfort in sight for mom. But he's just living the dream. But then when I scroll and they're like, your job is not to make your kids comfortable, it's to make them resilient. I'm like, well, should I get rid of the portable fan? The shade? Should he have a more approachable miniature car? I don't know. I think it is hard not to just want your kids to have the best, most comfortable existence ever. And you just love being able to provide that. But yeah, at a point I'm like, I think I overthink this and have too many safeguards because I don't like being hot and I don't like being sunburned and I like being comfortable. So then I'm projecting it onto him. Anyway, not the point. The more riveting thing all of you want to talk about is water tables. Let me know if at one point we just sit back and if they drink some of it, it happens. It's whatever. Let the pink eye happen. better than a Great Wolf Lodge, you know? Um, Actually, it's like a mini aquatic center in the home. I mean, it's on our deck, but, less bacterial transmission and adult small talk than a Great Wolf Lodge, which is a plus. But I guess I'm not sure on the bacteria part anymore is what I'm saying. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. And that's what I was trying to tell you I was not going to fill the time with because it is objectively uninteresting. But the other thing that I've been trying to do to doom scroll a little less and to just I don't know, feel like more of a person. I saw a video kind of scroll shaming, which sometimes I do need. TikTok, sometimes I feel a little called out when it's like, are you still scrolling? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've had a long day and I can't sleep. Get a life. Kind of like when Netflix shames you with the, are you still watching Ginny and Georgia season 3? And I'm like, yeah, I feel like it's crawling. It's taking a while to get to the trial, but I'm still here. And what was I saying? Sorry. My brain just tried to go off on a Ginny and Georgia tangent, but I know I don't want that for myself. I saw a video that was like, if you've been scrolling, can you name 5 things you learned or saw or can and when you can't, and if you do that exercise with yourself, it's not to make you feel bad, because I do think there's so much value from the connectivity of scrolling to a point. But when you get in one of those deep scrolls where you almost keep scrolling because you can't find anything of interest and you almost want to make it worth it that you spent that long. Anyway, so I've been doing that. And when TikTok first came out, I felt like I was learning stuff and getting really inspired and good ideas, but I don't know if I feel that way anymore. And I'm trying to reconnect with my adult hobbies. And I realized I used to have so many, but I monetized them all. Many millennials do. I used to be so artsy and into crafts and making stuff. And then obviously the doormat business was changed my relationship to that. And then my hobby of pop culture, monetize that. Love to write, journal, poems, all that, monetize that. But now that Teddy and I are trying to find a balance of things he likes, but also things we can do together that we both like. And I am kind of artsy, so we've been doing a lot of arts and crafts type stuff. And I'm like, I want to do this again. This is so peaceful. So I've been watercoloring, and it's been really nice. And I'm not very good. I watercolored lemons this weekend, which was exciting. And I just think it's a really forgiving medium for beginners if you're looking for something zen. So yeah, we've been watercoloring, and we've been writing our own little songs. I love writing poems, and I have a lot of unpublished children's books and stuff. So I've been testing out material, LOL, that I could monetize. And I think we wrote a banger this weekend called "Don't Get Stuck Garbage Truck." Maybe I'll post the link somewhere, just so it drop to a Dropbox file. Because if you have a kid that loves garbage trucks, it kind of slaps, and it teaches a lesson about teamwork. And it's about a garbage truck that gets stuck in the mud. I was talking about on Instagram this week how I just find it so utterly sweet and heartwarming, and I'm obsessed with how kind and lovely strangers are when it comes to toddlers, especially those that operate or drive or have vehicles they're drawn to. And the amount of firefighters and garbage truck drivers and construction people that are just so sweet to my 2-year-old when he's gawking at their vehicle, whether it's showing him around or say, you can come in, or, the garbage truck man the other day, showed him how it works and crushed garbage. And I'm I never thought I'd see the day I'm chasing a garbage truck down a city alley to do something entertaining for my kid. But that's where we are. But he's been talking about it for days. So many of you guys were telling me the cutest stories about garbage truck drivers or firefighters, whatever, getting out of the car and high-fiving and chatting, taking photos, whatever. I don't know. I think it's nice. It's helpful to have faith restored in humanity now and again. But anyway, you guys, I did not mean to talk for that long, but today we do have a guest. We have Katie Gatti Tassin, who we are welcoming back. You might know her from Money with Katie, which is a podcast with Morning Brew, also a really popular newsletter that's focused on personal finance. But she also has a podcast called Diabolical Lies on Substack that I'm sure you've heard of. I know there's a lot of Beths that are fans. Her and her co-host, Carol Claire Burke, they talk about things that really sit at the intersection of culture, feminism, and politics, and do these really great deep dives. And we talk about some in the episode. But she was on last year, and I wanted to have her back because I know a lot of you love her and listen to her pods. But she wrote this incredible book called Rich Girl Nation. And what I love about it is, well, it's a combination of cultural analysis and criticism, of knowledge sharing, and actual tangible, helpful advice. But it's also entertaining. Like the finance related books, not only are they often written by like a finance bro or a boomer that shames you for like the cost of lattes, like give me a break. Can we not spark joy in this life and in these times? Are we still saying spark joy? That's very Marie Kondo core. And I feel like we've turned on her in recent years. I feel like I threw too much stuff away. Do you guys? I feel like I'm typically deterred from the category, but this is so good, so interesting, and so entertaining. And the way she combines all of these things to actually make it a fun read along with a really helpful one that has not only chapters that are really insightful conversations that are just, I don't know, feminist discussions I always want to be having, like the hot girl hamster wheel and the nature of, consumption as a form of self-care, and even how financial language has been co-opted to, assist in consumerism and wealth depletion instead of building in terms of maintaining our appearance. And how we're investing in ourselves and there's no return. And anyway, stuff like that. But she also has really granular, specific chapters about tax loopholes, about prenups, about different elements of wealth building. And the whole book's about how women uniquely experience and interact with money. And I just thought it was a really fascinating read. And so I wanted to have her back on the pod. Obviously, this is not a finance podcast, so we don't get into the chapters that are more specific, but we talk about like the hot girl hamster wheel and stuff for a while. The world we live in is so fascinating, and especially how prominent influencers are and how that relates to consumption, and also just like how our algorithms now, especially like the goal seems mostly to make our entire like digital world shoppable. And like the shoppability of everything, I think is really fascinating. Anyways, there's just endless things I could talk about on this topic, but typically I don't, because I'm not really a sterling example of fiscal responsibility. Just this weekend, I got to Costco too early, and they wouldn't let me in, but people were going in and out and buying stuff, and it was 25 minutes early. I was like, well, that guy just came in and went out, and he bought a diesel-sized package of hamburger buns, so how do you do that? And they're like, oh, they're executive members. You get in early, which actually I didn't know, and is great because I was there on July 3rd, which brave. But yeah, instead of wait the 25 minutes, what did I do? I upgraded executive membership. Like this. I have problems spending money for convenience. And I also, just wait till you hear what I spent at Sephora after the election, which comes up in this episode. But regardless, she gives good advice that's far more helpful than any I can give. And other than that, I've just been on Le Creuset talk. You know those like cast iron, colorful Dutch ovens and stuff? I guess, so if you go to, you can buy tickets to like this Le Creuset VIP sale in different cities. I think the ticket is $50. And then you have to spend at least $150 to $175 to be eligible for a mystery box. Then the mystery box is $50. So all in, it is a $225 minimum investment. However, when you open the boxes, and I guess there's this whole culture of people doing it in parking lots, because you can like trade, and I don't know. I think there might be rules about reselling, which I do love. And it sounds like Le Creuset is really fixed for a lot of the problems we experience on Ticketmaster, and I wish they'd take note. But I was watching these videos where people open these $50 mystery boxes, and they have we'll get over $1,000 worth of random cast iron products. But I guess people collect them, pass them down generations. They last forever. I don't know. I don't have any. I don't even know what you use a Dutch oven for. And these women were losing their minds over something called a brazier, which I assume is what you use to braise things. But I was like, it just like never is ever crossed my mind to get a brazier. But I love watching people experience joy as it relates to their hobbies, right? That's my whole kick 'em on. And I guess they have they have limited releases or low inventory of different colors, and then people get so excited over the colors. So the gasping in the opening of watching what color Le Creuset thing they got, they opened it. Truly was addictive. It was really interesting. And I brought it up on Instagram, and I guess I didn't give a lot of context. So there's the context if you were missing that. And that's an example of something that actually could theoretically be an investment. I don't know what the resale value is. The randomest stuff, anything that's limited release has crazy resale value. And it's frustrating to me because these places could be making more stuff. Or little sleepies prints, those pajamas. I give to most of my friends and stuff who have younger kids. I also have to save some if I have another kid. But I put some of the nicer ones on Facebook Marketplace, or the more like limited edition ones, just for kicks. Someone was at my house within an hour. I can't believe. Are you guys in that Facebook group? That's a different conversation. So yeah, it's like some things are confusingly investments that you almost wouldn't expect, and it's usually because of a limited release. And these Le Creuset things, people, obsess over the color. And it was so much fun watching people pull their pieces out of their box and see what colorway they had. And they just would get so excited. And then I got excited. I'm like, oh my God, it's sea salt. There's this like berry colored one with a gold handle, gold hardware what a knockout. Artichoke, gorgeous. I all of a sudden am very interested in Dutch oven life. And again, I do not know what you cook in there because I feel like most things can be done with like a Pyrex or a normal pan. But I have a lot to learn. And I gather the hot take is that the one color people seemed like visibly disappointed by it was called Flame, which is a orangey red, like a Lady Danger MAC, which I didn't mind. And if my research serves me right, it's the most popular one in France, which actually is interesting because TikTok is a place that frequently loves to, for lack of a better word, shame American women who aren't as chic and effortless as French women. I mean, French girl makeup, a French girl red lip, it's more like smushed and blotted than a superior line. French pharmacies being superior. I get the videos of, okay, the phenomenon of not just French, but in general, like a lot of European parents and how they're like fundamentally better than American parents. I fell for the bringing up bébé propaganda, and similar to Lean In, which we talk about in this episode, to tie things together because we are going places and going to get to the interview. I feel like it maybe hit better in the 2010s. The gist is like French children are allegedly more well-behaved in like restaurants. They sleep better. They're more independent at an earlier age. Americans are the pets and helicopter parents and whatever. Which I don't know. I say as I obsessively scrub Teddy's water table. Whatever. I'm all up in his grill, but he's all up in mine. And where's my book about that? If I remember correctly, I didn't finish it, and the vibe to me was kind of like when you have fertility issues and people ask you if you've tried relaxing. Like, I am who I am, and I don't know how much of this is inner work I need to be doing and problematic helicopter parenting, or if it is perfectly valid to like worry about your kid getting pink eye at a slimy water table. Do I need to chill out? The least chill thing about me is how much time I spend wondering if I should be more chill in a particular situation. Anyway, you guys, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Please enjoy Katie Gatti Tassin, aka Money with Katie, by her book Rich Girl Nation. And I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Enjoy the interview. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Be There in 5 podcast. Our guest today is host of the Money with Katie podcast and author of the newsletter of the same name with the Morning Brew. She's also the co-host of a podcast I know so many of you are obsessed with called Diabolical Lies, which is on Substack and has absolutely taken off this year. And I think is amazingly named after the thing Harrison Bucker said women are told, if I'm not mistaken.
It is my muse, Harrison Bucker.
Side note, I want to talk about Diabolical Lies and all the things, but also today I want to talk about Rich Girl Nation, her brilliant book that just came out. It's a guide to thriving under capitalism that points out the nuances of how women experience money differently. It approaches I think what can be a very intimidating, or as we talked about when Katie was last on the podcast, like a shame spirally subject. But to me, this book approaches it with as much wit and compassion as it does helpful and tangible how-tos, and not to mention a lot of thought-provoking cultural analysis. And I'm a fan of her brain. I know a lot of the best are a fan of her work, and I'm so excited you're back with us today. Welcome back to the Be There in 5 podcast, Katie Gatti Tassin.
I'm so happy to be here back in the land of the Beths. I'm a Beth myself. I love the Beths. So thank you for having me back. I'm so excited to talk today.
I was reflecting on when you were on last year. Last year, you found my book, I think, asked me to come on your show. As we're talking on your show, I'm like, do you want to just come on mine? I just want to keep talking. And then we just kind of kept in touch and we'll voice note each other. And we still never met. But
that was the long game, though, because before I found you, I had obsessively listened to your back catalog and read your book, and then basically decided that I was going to make you be friends with me. So I think my master plan really paid off.
Well, it's it really is cool too, because it's for you to pursue me from my work and then for me to become obsessed with yours and to learn so much from you, I think is I really not only with your financial work, which we talked about last time you were on the pod, but do you mind if we really quick touch on Diabolical Lies, which
Let's
you
do
started
it.
when last?
Claire Burke, my co-host, and I started Diabolical Lies back in, I think it was last summer around this time, like July. And that was also like a friendship that started with voice notes and then became a we should have a podcast. And we basically started doing it kind of as like a these are things that we are interested in and want to talk about, but feel like there is something in the mainstream popular conversation that's not being said, or there's like an angle that isn't being touched on that we want to talk about. I remember our very first episode we did after the Sunday Times piece on Ballerina Farm went really viral. And that episode, we sat down to do it, and I thought we were just gonna have like this fun conversation about trad wives, and it devolved into this grander discussion of is free will real? Like, does anyone have free will? Does Hannah Nealman have free will? And that was really when I realized, like, oh, we're off to the races. Like, this is not gonna be a normal podcast. So we've done a lot of interesting work on it, and I've learned so much doing it. Like, we switch off every week of who's going to lead the episode and kind of teach the other person about the material. So we really took a note from the Michael Hobbs cinematic universe. He has podcasts like You're Wrong About, Maintenance Phase, If Books Could Kill. And that's the format that they do, where one co-host teaches the other co-host about something, and then the co-host who's learning is kind of going in without any background and just live reacting to what they're hearing and responding to it. And so some of the episodes that I've done, like we did one about Luigi Mangione and who becomes a terrorist in America. That one was very heavy. I like read the Patriot Act for it, and kind of like surveillance state capitalism. I did one about the men are not all right crisis and like modern masculinity. Done one about kind of shifting gender dynamics in the Republican Party and like the Christy Nome of it all. I did a
What
really
about
deep
dermal
dive on
fillers? I thought was really
capitalism. Oh my
interesting.
God, the injectables episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really like nothing is off the table. Anything that interests us we'll talk about, but it all does typically, just because of our interest areas, come back to economics, gender, or politics in some way, which is basically everything. That's a way of saying we'll talk about whatever we want.
It is like so. But I have the same problem where by the time I'm at the end of the episode, my existential questions are so great that the research I've just done or the dissertation I've just performed, I'm like, what the fuck was the point of that? But that's almost the sign of a good deep dive, I think, is
Hmm.
going so in the weeds that it almost like expands your thinking
Yes.
to a point that almost feels overwhelming.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I love your deep dives, by the way. I think that you're right. I think when you're doing a good deep dive, the sign is that you should be less sure of how you feel about it. Like you should walk away
Thousand
understanding a
percent.
level of nuance that you're like, oh, that actually was not as black and white as I thought it was. Like I love walking away from those conversations being like, oh, damn, that like actually completely changed my perspective on this. I think that's really powerful.
Do you have, since we uniquely have a similar job and I can't ask this that many people this question, I'm struggling a bit with becoming like a miniature expert on things for like 2 week periods that my
Mhm.
brain is very one in, one out information wise. And I feel like my short term memory has suffered since the deep diving on the podcast because I have to retain and process a ton of information in really short periods of time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I haven't I was gonna say I haven't noticed like short-term memory loss yet. That's probably coming, but what I have noticed is that because of just the sheer intake, where I will be reading like 4 books at a time. And I will be constantly, there are so many different sources that I like to read from where I think they're covering things in unique ways. So, like, I love reading socialist feminist sources because I think they're really good at connecting the dots in ways that, like, you're not going to get in a mainstream newspaper or in a newspaper that has like a lot of corporate interests backing it. Um, I will sometimes like forget where I'm learning things and then be like, I know
Yep.
this is not an original idea. I know I didn't think of this, but I could not even begin to tell you where I learned this. So like the chances that I'm going to be able to cite this properly because it was just one line in one of the books that I'm reading right now, but it's fun. Like I actually love my favorite thing in the world is just getting like super cracked out on coffee and spending 6 hours just going down rabbit holes and then coming up for air later and feeling like the Always Sunny murder board where you have like all the things connecting and you're like, I
Totally.
can see the matrix. I can see it. And like when that happens and it all connects, it's like such a high. There's no better feeling.
It really is a high, and I'm glad you said that because I feel the same way about deep diving and researching things. And sometimes I think to myself, is this how other people feel at music festivals? Because I feel very lost at those. But
Yes, I relate to that.
it's something about information gatherings like really exciting to me. And my short-term memory loss, I think it's like what disappoints me about myself is that I'll know everything about something for a brief time, but then I can't go back and remember all the stuff I talked about in a deep dive.
Do you
That's
ever go back and listen to your own?
no, I have such a strict rule now because when I did I used to do that, but then I would delete the episodes, and now people are like, "Where episodes 1, 6, 44?" And I'm like,
Oh
"Oh,
my
I
God.
just thought I was annoying on a bad day."
I love
Do remember a lot about carbonated beverages from Poppy because I was like so out of my wheelhouse, but I had a great time. But okay, so one of the obviously you have so many, there's so much good content in this book, and each chapter focuses on like a different relationship we have to money. I can only focus on a few, and you know I was going to dive into the hot girl hamster wheel, which you brought up last year that I was like, and I think about this and I reference this all the time because I'll let you in your own words explain to people the
Sure.
hot girl hamster wheel and what chapter one is all about before I get into my thoughts.
Sure. And I'm excited to hear your thoughts. So, the hot girl hamster wheel is how I describe the expenses that are required to maintain kind of what I will jokingly call the acceptable feminine appearance. So, the thing about the hamster wheel and why I call it the hamster wheel is because, as all of us know, none of this is one and done. This is not something you can purchase one time and be done with. All of it has to be constantly maintained and re-upped because your body will slowly over time reject the modifications and enhancements that you're making. And the particularly insidious thing about it, and what really kind of brought my attention to it from a financial angle, is that these are bodily investments that you are making, aesthetic interventions that you are making that actually leave you worse off. Like there's actually something kind of
Mm.
coercive about them. So think about the way that like when you get a gel manicure, how nice it looks at first. Like it will make you better at first. But then as time goes on and it grows out and it starts looking bad, not only does like the product itself look worse, but your natural nail underneath now looks worse too. It's probably yellowing, it's probably brittle. You can't just like snap your fingers and go back to the way that you were before. Same goes for all my ladies out there that are on the highlight grind like me. When the highlights grow out, it looks worse, or any hair color, really. Anything that grows out is going to look worse than it did naturally before you changed it because that line of demarcation is like kind of unsightly. So now you're kind of trapped. You can't just stop doing it, or you could, but again, you are in some ways, quote unquote, worse off than before. I think this takes on a whole nother level of intensity when we're talking about Botox and filler, particularly things like preventative Botox for young people and this idea that you need to start early. And they're now finding that, like, with all these people who start getting Botox in their early 20s, that the muscle is actually beginning to, for some of these women, it like not decays. Your muscle isn't decaying, but when you're not using those muscles for that long, the skin actually thins and gets crepier on top of it. So I think that in a lot of ways we participate in these aesthetic interventions because we sense that the way that we look matters. We know that the way that we look impacts how other people treat us. Pretty privilege is real, both socially and in the workplace, financially. All of these things are true. And yet, I don't think that many of us really think about what we're getting ourselves into when we step onto that hamster wheel and the way in which every dollar that we spend really functions like a commitment to spend more in the future. And so in the book, I talk about let's quantify this, right? How much money are we really talking about? And on average, as of 2017, so like this has certainly gone up, both because of inflation and because of the increasing prevalence of Botox and filler and other cosmeceuticals. The average woman was spending something like $300 a month on aesthetic upkeep. And so I just looked at that through the lens of opportunity cost and said, all right, well, if she's investing that money instead, what would she have? And over a 40-year career, we're talking about $1 million. So that was a really revelatory moment for me of I know that most of us understand what we're spending right now. I don't think many of us understand what we're really giving up in the long term to pursue these norms. And so, I mean, I could say way more, but I'm curious. I'm curious how it struck you and what you thought.
Sometimes I have trouble really grasping things in a quantifiable means. But something you said that I thought was so that clicked with me of holy shit was when you were talking about your expenses. I think it was when you were maybe first out of college or like the early years in the corporate world with a paycheck that your spending on beauty maintenance was a month's worth of income. So you had to work a month. I forgot you wrote it, something about that. I was like, that's insane that like
Yes.
to have to a month of your income is going to just like maintaining your appearance for this like arbitrary return we've convinced ourselves is there that materially is not there, that as you argue socially is kind of there unfortunately in some ways, but
Hmm.
not in a way that benefits your wealth building. It's actually quite wealth depleting. But yeah, I thought that was a really interesting exercise.
Yeah, so I basically at the time I was taking home around $1,500 every 2 weeks. So I knew that like my net income every month was around 3 grand after taxes, and I was contributing to a 401k, but that didn't really feel like my savings at the time because I couldn't touch it. And so when I saw that I was spending about in line with the average, and by the way, this is why I always encourage women when they do this to do the kind of hot girl detox and figure this out for themselves, is to annualize all your costs. So the tricky thing about beauty spending is that because it's all happening on different timelines and on different cadences, it can be easy to, it's death by a thousand cuts. Like, you know, when you go to get your hair done and it costs $200 or whatever, that like you're spending a lot of money. But if you're also doing the eyebrows and the eyelashes and the nails and the pedicures and the tans and the waxes and whatever, it can be really powerful to be like, okay, how often am I doing this and what does it cost every time after tip? Figure out what that represents for an entire year and then add all that up. And then once you annualize it, you can see it contextually against your salary. And that will really put it into context for you. Because when I saw that, okay, I'm spending what, $3,500, $3,600 a year on this stuff, and I make $3,000 a month, I was like, oh my God, is that really worth it? Like, am I really getting 6 weeks worth of labor value out of
Right.
this? And the bottom line, and I think the tricky thing is that, like, the closer you already are to the beauty standard, the less risk you have for basically straying from it. So if you are a thin, able-bodied, white, cis woman who is like, already kind of conforms to like Eurocentric beauty standards, you basically face no risk from getting off the hamster wheel, realistically speaking. And so, like, the more your natural state diverges from that Eurocentric beauty standard, the more you might feel like that risk is real. And in some cases, it really is. I mean, particularly like the data around the wage penalty for fat women is extreme. I mean, it's like the the last I checked, it was something like 12% wage penalty if your BMI is over 30. So this stuff is real. So I don't want to, downplay it or suggest that like that feeling of vulnerability or risk that you might have from divesting from these systems is all in your head. But I do think it's really important to talk about what that ROI actually is. What are you actually getting? Because, like, yes, there is an ROI, a little one, it is incremental, but it pales in comparison to the ROI that you could be getting by investing that money instead. I mean, it's just not even close. So, you're probably investing a lot of money in your appearance if you are, because you think it's going to bring you confidence, safety, security, stability, all these very natural human needs and desires. But having financial strength in an extractive system that you control, that nobody can take away from you. And like Unilever can't change when they decide fluffy brows are out and thin brows are in again. Like that is pretty invaluable to me. So I think we just have to be honest about what those ROIs are and not get caught up in the industrialized beauty industry's messaging that like, the only power that a woman should be pursuing is beauty. Because as my favorite thinker, and now hopefully I can consider her a friend, Tressie McMillan Cottom says, beauty is the only power that women are allowed to use but never own. It is rented,
Oh,
and it
Jesus.
costs a lot of money to keep renting it.
Yeah, dang. That if I had a pen near me, I'd write that down because and I wrote down so many quotes in this chapter because in term regarding like empowerment and social capital because I think something too that this chapter tied together really nicely is like kind of the how crazy it is too the way marketing has co-opted financial terminology to essentially
Yes.
trick you into thinking you're meaningfully investing in yourself. Beauty and wellness hijacking financial language to like convince people that consumption is like a fiscally responsible thing. For to your point,
So
that
smart.
lack of return is crazy.
Yeah. And I think empowering too is such a funny word. We talked about this in our recent Skinny Talk episode of Diabolical Lies, how you're now seeing this shift happen in overt thinspiration content where they're talking about how it's empowering to do XYZ, be XYZ. Typically, we're talking about restrictive tendencies. And we were really trying to get into inside that word empowering and like, what does that really mean? Because it feels so fuzzy and feminist, but really it just means give power. And so, yeah, in a system where being like white, blonde, thin, and hot is like gives you power, then yeah, I guess it's empowering to conform to that. But is that really the goal? Like, should we be asking bigger and better questions about what it's all for? And the the work of a woman named Jessica DeFino has been so impactful for me. I highly recommend everybody check out her Substack, The Review of Beauty, if you're into this conversation and like want to get bigger and, deeper into the beauty part of it specifically. But she always kind of reframes these conversations and the marketing co-option of language, like, feminist language, as we have to remember what feminism is. Feminism is not about empowering individual women to have more power under
It's
capitalism or under
not.
patriarchy. It's about the collective liberation from gender oppression. And so when you take that broader view, it makes way more sense why, this isn't good for anybody. Like when you think about it through that lens of gendered oppression, I think we can start to have more productive and, you know, substantive conversations about it. But yeah, I mean the marketing, it's crazy the way in which the marketing has really almost replaced the more philosophical underpinnings in our mainstream conversations about these things and like really fooled a lot of us into thinking that we're making really good choices for ourselves. And I mean, I don't know. I still get my hair done. Like I got a manicure for my book launch. So it's not that you can't participate. I mean, I think it's just about understanding what those it's about understanding what that participation actually costs and making sure that you're participating in a way that you actually feel really good about. And I mean, I don't know, not everything you do has to be an explicitly feminist choice. That's something Jessica says, but you just kind of have to. It's important that we don't recast those decisions as feminist in retrospect to kind of like retroactively justify the consumption. It's okay to consume things. It's okay to make choices that are not feminist, but we should call it what it is and kind of go into it eyes wide open.
Totally. And something that struck me when you were talking about how wealth depleting the big picture of the hamster wheel can be is what's kind of a bit insidious is the people responsible for influencing us a lot of times for this hyperconsumption with beauty products and procedures and whatnot are influencers, and they are uniquely the only people
Mm-hmm.
who for for whom their consumption actually does produce a return. which
So interesting.
incentivizes them to get us to buy shit when we don't produce a return. And it's almost like that's an interesting thing for me to think about too, because I kind of laugh when bloggers talk about like investment pieces in capsule wardrobes, unless you have a Birkin or something. I don't really know that an equipment blouse from 2012 really did much for me in the resale market. But like that is kind of how influencers adopt it from marketers and it trickles down. And there's just, yeah, a lot of different motivations there.
That's really interesting. I think I've heard you talk about that in the context of home renovations before too. How like renovating, like an influencer renovating their home is like doing it just as much for the content and the brand partnerships as they are like resale
Yeah.
value and
I think
how,
they need something to talk about.
yeah, I agree. You know how hard, like honestly, it would be so hard to be a lifestyle influencer. I could never. Because
Oh,
I'm so boring. Like, yeah, you have to, it's kind of like reality television. You have to manufacture storylines for yourself.
1,000%. And I think that their recommendation kind of being rooted in something that they actually are seeing a return on because of your engagement is an important distinction in their mindset when recommending something, because every product they buy is an opportunity to make affiliate money. What's funny is because you did the math in the chapter of like calculating your opportunity cost of beauty spending.
Hmm.
Um, I was not that I was proud of myself, but
Hmm.
I do think that balayage, ombre, acceptance of darker roots has been transformational for my budget. And it
Thank
kind of
you,
made me,
Haley Bieber.
yeah, it made
Teddy
me
Brett. What the
tailspin.
fuck is the name of the hair color now? I agree. I completely agree.
Oh, is it like old money blonde or something? I have no fucking clue. I hate those terms too. It's almost really interesting to like see patterns in yourself. For example, I didn't get rouge status last year for Sephora, and I was like, hell yeah, like I'm a savings queen.
Low maintenance
But
queen.
looking at the pattern of spending, there was two transactions. One of them was $719, and guess when that was? It was November 6th, 2024. So it's like consumption as emotional regulation, like in front of my face, even though I intellectually know this is something you shouldn't do, I still very much do it.
That is so, I've never actually seen like such a perfect black and white example of that. That's
Like, why did I
hysterical.
run to Sephora? Like, that would be that was the word, that was almost the most offensive place I could have run.
Well, oh my God, I guess like what's been really interesting to me on the beauty note, and not that we have to continue to talk about beauty, but I do think that
It's relevant to this podcast, so I actually do want to talk about, if you don't mind digging that,
oh, I
like
don't care at
extensively
all. I
digging into
just,
Hot
yeah,
Girl.
I'm like, I could talk about this for hours. So if you set me up for that, that's what I'm gonna do. But it has been really like one thing that does fascinate me is like the Mar-a-Lago face phenomenon and the way that beauty work, aesthetic intervention, and just like gender dynamics more broadly are playing out in our politics right now. I find it so fascinating. And something that I wrote about for Salon magazine recently was kind of connecting that gender norm orthodoxy resurgence and this idea that you have to be like performing your femininity more aggressively now, or that that's just kind of culturally where we're moving because the culture is kind of experiencing this like conservative backlash, that is so connected to our economic situation. So, I think that a very popular, maybe the most popular example of this, and something that I've noticed, is this obsession culturally with 1950s nostalgia and how that was the time that is memorialized by these television programs that, because that was kind of like when television became very popular in the United States. You have like Leave It to Beaver and like shows like that that demonstrate these very quote unquote traditional nuclear family dynamics, and that even at the time was kind of propagandized, but like now it's really heavily propagandized and is associated with this period of American prosperity and a strong middle class and a time when things were stable and America was powerful. And like, I mean, it's in the slogan, Make America Great Again. It's this callback to that earlier period, which, by the way, is a ripoff of that was Ronald Reagan's slogan too, Make America Great Again. So that's a loaded, rich text that we could spend some time with. But that the thing about the 1950s that I don't think enough people realize is that the corporate tax rate was very high. The top marginal tax rate for high income people was 91%. Labor power and union density was at an all-time high. So basically, workers had power and corporations had much less power. Um, it was a different time economically, and it was a time when our government actually intervened to create a middle class. But because we don't have a strong economic analysis or like a material analysis on the left, all we're left with is all these cultural explanations for why things are shitty now. And when we look back to the 1950s, we look at the gender roles and we go, oh, it must have been good because of the gender roles. When in
Mm.
reality, it was a completely different economic paradigm that with policy shifts, we could get back to gender roles be damned. But I think that like that economic upheaval and the general sense of instability that people feel and like that precariousness that just seeps into everyday life now for increasingly more and more people, I think that that is really a big, big driver of this recommitment to and turning back toward these gender norms that people think and associate with that level of stability. And so, obviously, aesthetic upkeep and performing your femininity, I mean, all of that is connected. But yeah, I mean, it runs really, really deep. And I do think that that's why, a more popular understanding of like economically what is happening in our country and why it's happening is so important for people because I think it makes it easier to see through a lot of the bullshit.
Oh, for sure. And the researching the 1950s propaganda era of the United States post-war, it's like a hobbyist venture of mine that I'm obsessed with like actual accounts of people from that time, women from that time. And when you read like even I just thought this was an interesting tidbit like the trope of, kind of vacuuming in heels, June Cleaver vibes, like that's actually rooted in women unceremoniously pushed out of the workforce when people returned from war and they wanted to be in their homes and feel dignified and dressed for work. And it actually wasn't
Mm.
necessarily for their husbands when they got home. And I think that thinking kind of humanizing women in that era too, and how they were expressing themselves in the face of being under such a strict patriarchal structure is super fascinating to give them more credit than just being these cartoonish housewives.
Yeah, because the popular understanding of that time now is so far from the reality. I mean, I think there's also the fact that that period led to the greatest women's and civil rights movements that this country has ever seen. Like there was a strong backlash to the essentially like stripping of women's economic freedom and rights. And the women's rights movement of the 1970s is still responsible, excuse me, is still so responsible for a lot of the we're still enjoying the benefits of that. Like their work for anti-discrimination and like the fact that you can get a bank account now. I mean, all of these things came out of the 1970s women's movement, and all of that was a response to the culture of the 1950s and people being like, we don't want this. I think, too, like, I mean, I talk shit about Ronald Reagan all the time. It's like one of my pastimes. But Reagan is, when he was governor of California, was like the first one to institute no-fault divorce. And then eventually it rippled through the rest of the country. And women's, like, the suicide rate for women went down by 20%. So, I mean, this idea that the fact that like no-fault divorce is like even in the conversation right now, taking
Yeah,
that away is
truly,
terrifying.
genuinely terrifying. And I think this is why, I mean, this is why I get so mad when Maddie Pruitt's, out here on her podcast being like, feminism's to blame for X, Y. Like the conservative people with mics love, love, love to blame feminism for everything. And I'm like, hey, like, do you know how you're getting paid? You have a credit card, you have
Yep.
autonomy. You are so indebted to the work of so many women before you and shitting on the very thing that puts you in a position to be in front of this mic. And it drives me absolutely insane.
Same. It's so infuriating. I'm like, Gloria Steinem, don't look. Gloria, stay off the internet. I hope you never see this shit. It's also so frustrating for me because I think like so much of what they critique feminism for is actually capitalism. And like in a weird way, in some of these circles, you'll notice that they actually will start to use anti-capitalist language. But then it's a movement called reactionary feminism. I think that's kind of how you could classify it, which is like feminism has gone too far. Feminism is bad for women. It's very like hetero-pessimistic. So basically, men are trash, they'll never improve. A lot of biological essentialism. And I think if you listen to the complaints that a lot of the Maddie Pruitt types have about modern culture, modern work, the way that society is structured, almost all of it is actually a critique and a complaint about capitalism. But they don't
Mm.
have the language to express that.
I would love to listen to a Diabolical Lies about Maddie Pruitt capitalism.
I'm gonna write that down. While we're on the subject, yeah, that's anyone listening who's not in
Really
the
interesting
Patreon,
take.
you need the Be There in Five Patreon episode about Maddie Pruitt in your life yesterday.
God, she kills me. And you're talking about just, is it Defino or Delfino?
Defino.
I love her newsletter and I love her work about beauty. And I think sometimes people are struggle to have this conversation about the hot girl hamster wheel and about beauty standards because like they can be things that we acknowledge are big picture oppressive or made in the male gaze that we've adopted and been conditioned by, et cetera, et cetera. And we can also like them and they bring us
Hmm.
comfort. And per
Hmm.
what you were saying about your highlights in the book, like picking and choosing what you maintain. And I have to say, like the thing that forced me off the wheel, but not by choice, weirdly, but by default was motherhood and physically running out
Mm.
of time
Yes.
to perform a
Yep.
lot of beauty rituals. And I actually, the thing that was, and I'm using this is probably not the correct use of the word per our convo. The thing that was empowering to me is like choosing to re-engage. It's not realistic for me to ever break free of like beauty standards entirely. That would be a type of empowerment I wouldn't experience. But I genuinely did experience a positive change in my life about choosing to re-engage with them from a position of having survived without them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It was like I think there's another layer of how beauty standards affect moms, not only because of the tropes of bouncing back and stuff, but there is something like about bodily autonomy and identity that like almost going back to some of your beauty rituals feels like a reclamation, even though they represent something that inherently it's like a mess if I think about it too hard. I really think that when you line item these expenses like you advise people to do, it kind of creates that situation where by choosing to remove or reallocate some of these things, approaching beauty from a place of choice and not obligation is
Mm-hmm.
actually feels very different to me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
when you
and I
step
think
off the
sometimes
wheel of it, you
like
don't really need a lot of the things. And if you step off, you're like, oh, I'm fine.
yes. Yeah, I think sometimes like I recommend taking them off one by one and just seeing how each one feels and kind of like treating it like an experiment because what I experienced was just that I got a lot of time and mental energy back and that it was really valuable. But when there was a period last year where I did stop coloring my hair entirely and I let it grow out and I finally decided, like, okay, I could live with this. This would be fine. But I would like some like highlights around my face. Or like I'm gonna do like a balayage and just like I'm gonna basically compromise with myself and do mostly my real hair color, but with like little pops of color just to brighten me up a little bit because I prefer me that way after spending 15 years having full highlights and being very blonde. And what's interesting is I basically didn't wear makeup for like a year. And it was really nice. And what actually got me wearing it again and wanting to wear makeup again and enjoying it was I went through this hard period earlier this spring where I had the flu for a period. I was in kind of a funk. I had this foster dog from LA after the fires who was just like so sweet but so much work and I just felt constantly spread thin by this puppy. And like after like a month of just feeling like this dark cloud, I was like, I need to put a little bit of effort and time and like spend the effort and time on myself again. I think that will make me feel better. And it really did get me out of the funk. So it felt like this lever I could pull to improve my mood after a hard time that I can now engage with freely or not. And like, I don't really feel super strongly one way or the other. I feel comfortable as myself both ways, as opposed to what it felt like back then, which was like my baseline state, where if I deviated away from it, I would feel very insecure. And yeah, I think that has been kind of an interesting, like, coming back around to it now and being like, okay, how can I engage with fashion or makeup or like self-expression in a way that feels really fun and embodied and like additive and not, oh, I have to present this way to be acceptable.
Yes.
I think that there was a really interesting quote in an interview that Jessica did with another writer who I think's name is Camille Sojit. I don't want to butcher that. She writes a Substack about like the concept of pleasure. And something that they had both, I think, kind of expressed in this interview was ever since I divested from a lot of these routines, and I think Jessica like never wears makeup. I mean, like she's completely barefaced, like, completely natural all the time. And I think she said something to the effect of like, it's like, oh, do you feel naturally beautiful now? And she was like, well, no, I don't. But I feel really good about myself in ways that don't presently include the way that I look. And like, I
Mm.
think that there's actually a lot of power in that neutrality too, like giving your appearance less power over your day to day self-conception.
Oh, 1,000%. I don't know if you keep up with Addison Rae, but if have you noticed she doesn't wear makeup in any of her, like she's
I have
completely
not.
doing press
Wait,
for
that's so
this
cool.
album without wearing makeup. And I'm like, that is awesome.
Wait, I gotta see this. Hold on. I know it. Kara loves Addison Rae. That's so cool. That's really that like that honestly, I know that sounds dumb to be like, that's important, but I really think that that's partially why the decisions we make about beauty and self-presentation are more than just personal choices, because they do
Yeah.
impact other people. Like that's how beauty standards work. That's how norms work. So yeah, I think like sometimes I'll talk to women who have let their hair go gray and they're like, yeah, I mean, do I like love having gray hair? Not always, but I do feel powerful in the sense that I feel like I'm doing something liberatory for other women who like see me and might feel incrementally more comfortable going gray themselves and like allowing themselves to age. So I think that's a fun part of it too.
Did you watch the Alex Cooper documentary?
Yeah, I did.
There was a lot of, important stuff in that documentary that this is not the main takeaway. But walking away from it, I was like, I didn't get enough detail on the glow up between everybody bullied me. I never like boys wouldn't talk to me to like dating professional athletes in college and being this like
Yes.
blonde bombshell. And yeah, just like selfishly, I was interested in like what, anyways, she went on Armchair Expert and actually, which is a podcast I don't normally listen to, but she kind of explained that entire part of it. And it
Really?
was,
What'd she
and
say? I didn't hear this.
she talked about how transformative the experience was when she was like 14 and her mom let her get highlights and people responded to her differently. And I had the same experience where I went from invisible to getting a disproportionate amount of attention when I went from like mousy natural to blonde in ways that I think you internalize so deeply in terms of people just even like seeing you, acknowledging you. And that sounds so insane because I love the kind of mousy in between dark blonde. It's not about the hair color, it's about your experience and how people react to you when you participate in certain beauty trends or rituals. And you guys talked about this on the Skitty Talk episode too, where the weirdness of people kind of abstract tell you how great you look and you lost weight. It's like I think sometimes those can be the hardest things to like separate yourself from is just yeah maybe the almost inner child response too of how one you went from awkward to having these
Mm-hmm.
tools at your disposal to fix everything you didn't like about yourself at an age where you didn't have the wisdom or experience to accept yourself and that
Mm-hmm.
in its own way felt weirdly empowering at the time.
Dude, yeah. I mean, well, and it makes so much sense. Like we are social animals. It's so normal to want other people to love and accept you. And like, oh my God, talk about a fundamental human need. And I had a similar experience, like going from the brace-faced unibrow, having, mousy brown, kind of like scrawny middle school girl to like being in high school. I've got boobs now. That was a huge development, both literally and metaphorically. Getting highlights, braces come off, unibrows gone. Like having that glow up and then recognizing, oh, people treat me so much better. Like you said, you go from being invisible to getting a lot of positive attention. And I remember internalizing that a lot too and kind of being like, oh my God, I never want this to end. Like I didn't know life could feel this way. I mean, that's pretty privilege, right? Pretty privilege feels really fucking good. And so it can feel, like I said, kind of vulnerable to voluntarily dial back on that. It can feel
Mm-hmm.
kind of like it's like there's a little bit of game theory at play where it's like, if everybody's dialing back, then that's better for everybody. But if you're the only one who's abstaining, then it's just worse for you. And so, yeah, I mean, there's certainly no easy answers, but I do think that I empathize deeply with that feeling because I totally remember, and it sticks with you. It really sticks with you when you sense that like there are certain things that you can do to manipulate the way that you look, or you feel like, okay, this is what, isn't there some like novel? It's like The Summer I Got Hot or something. Like,
Summer I Turned Pretty.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Summer I Got Hot. That would have been a better name.
Summer I Became a Smoke Show. Yes.
Yeah, Summer I Became a Smoke Show. Where I remember having kind of like I mean, this was like a deeply personal chapter for me because I went through, I was a sorority girl at Alabama as well, where like talk about all this
Favorite.
on steroids.
I like forget that sometimes, and I just am like, oh, this is your arc from being a subscriber of American Cheerleader magazine to hosting Diabolical Lies. I mean, truly, nothing like it.
Growth is possible, everyone. I know. I always joke. We always talk about our like days in our. I mean, in college, I was, going through a Bama Rush in a Reagan Bush t-shirt. So anything is possible, guys. Um, yeah, but that like I remember having an almost obsessive and addictive relationship to beauty because I saw what it could unlock for you. And like it wasn't until I feel like I started gaining financial power and like seeing myself in another way. Like I really think that my self-concept shifted from like valuing being hot and valuing being well liked to valuing intellectual curiosity and integrity. And I think when I made that shift and like saw that I could be rewarded for that too and accepted for that too and actually build stronger connections on the basis of my mind and my ideas, that was when I was like, oh, all that was noise. Like all of that was really holding me back from, I don't know, like becoming the person that I really wanted to be. And so I don't judge my younger self at all. I think she was doing the best that she could and like, responding to the environments that she was in because like holy toxic as fuck, Bama Rush. But I just, if other women are like experiencing that and feeling that, I want them to know that there are other options available to them.
You just said the most beautiful series of sentences about self-development I've ever heard. And the worst part is I just am dying to ask you if you were old row or new row.
I was old row, bitch.
Not that it
Yeah, dude.
matters.
Not that it matters because everyone is everyone is old row in God's eyes. But yeah, I was old row.
Everyone is old row in God's eyes.
Right. Yeah, oh my God, I wanted to be old row so bad because I was from the north. And like as a northern girl, you want all that clout. You want to be in the top dog. I actually talked about this on a upcoming episode of Money with Katie show with Tressie, that I was in that system, but not of it. So even though I was able to manipulate my way via good grades and looking the part and speaking the part and being, I just tapping into that theater kid energy and like really letting the charisma shine through during Rush, I was able to get into an old row house. But once I was on the inside, it was very obvious from like day one that, oh, there's actually a hierarchy even within this house. And there's an in group within this house, and I am not in it. And like that was a hard realization to have. And I think that it just goes to show that like those power dynamics run deep and it's a losing game. Like you're even when you're in like one of the best sororities in like the school that's most known for Rush, like there's still further hierarchy and like jockeying and like weird fucking power dynamics. And like the sad thing is you just spend so much of your time preoccupied with that shit that like I mean, I still have like I'm still friendly with people that I was in a sorority with, but like my closest friends from college now were actually not in my sorority.
This episode is brought to you by Amika. Salon quality hair care, the best packaging, eco-friendly packaging and shipping, by the way. Gorgeous branding. I just love them so much. They're sponsoring Track 5 and giving the best product. And I love when they do these exclusive episodes. And Amika has 11 collections to ensure there are options for all hair types, textures, and styles, which I really appreciate. What works for my hair that I haven't told you about before is called Normcore shampoo and conditioner. And that results in clean, nourished, soft hair. It's very nutrient rich. It gently cleanses and refreshes the shampoo while adding kind of this like weightless hydration. And the conditioner adds moisture, it promotes elasticity. It's just, yeah, these are two great staple products for soft, silky, bouncy hair. And then a couple times a week, I'll use a soul food hair mask. And has a cult following. I noticed the teens surrounded it at Sephora's. So many of you are like, where's this been all my life? It's a creamy, nourishing mask that has like an obsessive following because of the way it makes your hair look. It is so soft, it's so silky. It's like lightweight and doesn't weigh your hair down. And if your hair is like porous or dehydrated, you can use it as like a weekly deep conditioning treatment. I'm obsessed with soul food hair mask, with Normcore. Perk Up Dry Shampoo is my life. If you were going to start somewhere, I'd say that's a great place to start. The full-size Perk Up Dry Shampoo is the #1 prestige dry shampoo in the U.S. And it's talc-free, absorbs oil. This literally thousands of 5-star reviews and is the only way I get by not washing my hair every single day as a grease monster. And also there's the Wizard Detangling Primer, which is a wonderful heat-protecting detangling leave-in spray that protects up against a 450-degree heat, which if you're curling like the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders and your head's just releasing steam, is something you definitely need. But it cuts down on blow-dry time, and it's also a great product. But regardless, you can check out all of my Amika favorites at loveamika.com/BeThereIn5 if you didn't retain any of that I just said. And right now, Amika is giving Be There in 5 listeners a one-time use code for 15% off your first order. That's 15% off. Go to my page at loveamika.com/BeThereIn5 and use code BeThereIn5 at checkout. That's loveamika.com/BeThereIn5, code BeThereIn5 to get 15% off your first order. Thanks to Amika for supporting the show. One thing I wanted to get to also in your second chapter, because there's a lot of ex-girl bosses here, I made my book club sit down. It was like a fictional book club. I made them sit down and read Lean In and do a whole discussion in like 2012 or whatever, because to your point about finding value in stimulating, intellectual pursuits, I think that since like I couldn't be super validated by grades, couldn't be super validated like socially by men, or didn't always feel good in the looks department, when I started working, people were like obsessed with me. And it was the first time I actually felt like I had something to contribute as a person. When I say obsessed, I mean I could like do like really good PowerPoints,
Yeah, you
and
were
they
like good
acted
at
like it was
corporate.
revelatory.
Yeah.
And it was like such an important period of confidence building for me, just to have it be expressed to me that I have value outside of those vanity metrics. And I think I got really into Lean In girl bossery because I was genuinely like empowered by and interested in the corporate pursuit that I now realize is individualistic in that context. But I will never forget reading the negotiation part of that and like really taking it to heart and just being like, oh shit, like I'm just a bad negotiator and that's why I'm in that position. Didn't take into account any systemic factors whatsoever. And beyond that, suggested that the best way to combat the system was to to hold the same posture as a man and act like them in the workplace, which you point out in the book actually works against women. And this chapter is just so interesting on so many levels. But what were you trying to get across with it?
You know what's funny too about the Lean In thing is that I was watching the Celebrity Memoir Book Club girls talk to Chelsea Fagan about Lean In recently on a financial diet video, and they had pointed out that, and I didn't remember this at the time, and I think Lean In has become kind of like a meme from the girl boss era now, but it is interesting because she does acknowledge some systemic factors in the beginning of the book, like not throughout the advice, but like she kind of calls out shortcomings at the beginning, and then is kind of like, okay, so yeah, these are a thing, and like we do need to focus on these. However, I am going to focus on all of these individual solutions. So like, fine. What's been so crazy? Did you read Careless People by Sarah Wynne Williams, the Facebook whistleblower?
I have it in my stack for the
Dude,
summer. I hear it's
Sheryl
awesome.
Sandberg is a freaking nut job. Like, assuming that all that is alleged in this book about her leadership style and the way that she treated the women that she worked with is true. Like, I will say this, generally speaking, I am very much be hard on systems, not people. Like that is a principle of mine that I try to come back to, is that, like, again, do we have free will? Anyone? Anyone.
Right.
But no, really, like, be hard on systems, not people. But I say that about Sandberg and like kind of the information in that memoir because I think that it makes me feel more comfortable critiquing Lean In for what it was, which I think is like a very narrow narrowly applicable set of advice that, I mean, one thing that I noticed about it in retrospect, kind of flipping through it again, is like she doesn't like mention unions in the book. She doesn't mention like labor power or like collective bargaining or any of these dynamics where, I mean, we know that women in unions have a gender wage gap that's like 10 percentage points smaller. So you actually do have some individual control over like whether or not you unionize your workplace, like completely gets glossed over. So anyway, my goal with that chapter, and I guess with Rich Girl Nation more broadly, is like I do want to talk about the systemic factors because the systemic factors matter so much, and like the systemic elements of the gender wealth gap, which I think is really what I'm concerned with in the book, is just like where we see that differential coming up and like what are the drivers of it. And so in chapter 2 in particular, I wanted to talk about the wage gap and the myths about the wage gap, why it happens, how tied the gender wage gap is to the gender care gap, and how
Mm-hmm.
women's roles as caretakers and kind of their in the cultural imagination, like how much that impacts women's ability to succeed at work and stay in the workforce. And, it kind of culminates in, let's just make sure that our causality here is correct and that it's not backwards, which is women don't earn less because they're bad negotiators, but negotiating in a way that navigates gender bias can help offset some of the, challenges and obstacles that you're likely to face as a woman in the workplace. And so, yeah, I mean, one of the most interesting findings was the fact that when women, negotiate quote unquote assertively or aggressively, this is probably going to be a surprise to nobody, they're more likely to be punished because we punish women who behave like men. Women who subvert gender norms and femininity norms are more likely to be punished for it. And so, one of the interesting takeaways that I talk about is the way that socialization impacts how women negotiate. And women are socialized to make people feel comfortable. So when they're in a tense conversation and they're deal making, right? They're essentially asking somebody for more money, more power, more prestige, whatever, these masculine coded goods. In order to make that situation more comfortable, and again to make that other person feel more comfortable, we are more likely to negotiate against ourselves. So like we'll make our case, but then we'll be like, oh, but I totally understand if that's not doable right now. And you kind of downplay and you negotiate against yourself, you do their job for them. And so one of the simplest tips that I encountered in the research that I reviewed and the experts that I spoke with was simply just to stop talking. Like, know what your case is,
Yeah.
make the case, structure it in this particular way, that is asking relationally and, thinking bigger about all the things that you can get. I lay it out in the chapter, but then stop talking and allow the uncomfortable silence, allow that other person to respond, and just kind of have that key phrase in your mind of you say your piece and then you go, what do you think? Boop, silence. And that alone can really help. It can help you get more in those situations.
I thought that was such good advice. And to the point where the thought of me stating my case, saying, what do you think? And pausing and sitting in the tense silence, like, the thought of that makes me like wince with nervousness. And because I know that, like, that's almost what I mean is like, that's how good of advice it was. I was like, oh, yeah, like I would go far to fill that space and fill that discomfort with something that would probably make me kind of backtrack or
Mm-hmm.
negotiate against myself. And I thought that was like such good tangible advice. And
Oh,
you
thank
also
you.
talked about something that I strongly believe in, which is it's not about how much work you do, it's about how much work people perceive that you do and the importance of self-advocacy. Can you touch on
So
that a little
annoying,
bit?
right?
So annoying.
Yeah. Well, the analogy that I make in the book is that workplaces, like humans, are imperfect. They're a
Hmm.
little bit like glorified high school lunchrooms. And so, unfortunately, perception is reality. And as much as this sucks, because I really hated this element of, working in an environment with other people, which is wonderful in many ways. But one of the things I did not like about it was the politicking and the peacocking and having to kind of like, represent yourself in that way. Because I felt like, well, hey, if I'm doing a really good job, like, shouldn't that be enough? Like, why do I have to perform doing a good job? But in many ways, that performance is more important than the work itself. And I think that the earlier that we accept that and like find a way to accommodate that reality with integrity, the better. And so I kind of talk about it with respect to this idea of socializing your wins, which I think is a really cringy phrase, but it's unfortunately like the best way to describe what you're doing. Very popular negotiation advice that I see all the time is, okay, catalog your wins at work. Like keep track of all the things that you're doing and all the ways that you're succeeding. And then when you go in to negotiate for more pay, you go into a performance review, you're going to like unfurl the scroll in front of the person and be like, see all the stuff I did? Let's talk about all the great stuff I did. But what's better and more important is that as those good things are happening, other people know about them. It's not just important that like your direct manager knows, but that you are building an engaged network of advocates around you, other people on other teams who, you want to build that broad perception. And so my thing is like, I want to work smarter, not harder. I'm not saying you need to be on Slack every Saturday morning. I'm not saying that like you need to be working 70 hours a week. But there are little tweaks that you can make in the way that you engage in the workplace with other people that will leave that disproportionately robust impression of your work ethic. And a lot of them are simple. I just call it going the extra yard. So, like, if you have to turn something around by Friday, do it by Thursday. If you're asked to come up with 3 factors that are impacting conversion, throw in a fourth, right? It's like little stuff like that. And the socializing your wins component is really about finding the way to communicate those wins broadly. I write about this one gal that I used to work with who was amazing at this. She has since left corporate America and become a lawyer, which I just think is so funny. But what she would do is she was always the one who was kind of communicating for her team. So like we would get emails from her periodically that would be like, "Hey, we just wanted to share out these findings from such and such that we did in case it's helpful," or like, "Hey, I took on this other project and, I wanted to let everybody know that these were the results and, let me know if you'd like to hear more, happy to share." So like she kind of was just constantly, she felt like she was everywhere. She was kind of constantly on your mind. And I don't think that that was because she was actually working harder than everybody else, but she was really, really good at making her presence and making the work that she was doing well known throughout the department. And I think she actually did put quite a bit of time into thinking about how she was being perceived and like working on those both presentation interpersonally, but also like putting herself in that position to be the one that was presenting findings to leadership and stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, it sounds so dumb, but that's really that's how workplaces work. And that's how people get into higher visibility positions and get the opportunities that enable you to earn more and like kind of be top of mind for people that have decision-making power.
Right. And I think it's almost like the pendulum swung. It was the lean in era, and then the pendulum swung so far in terms of like, okay, the empowering message got us a seat at the table, but then I think a lot of us millennials became kind of disillusioned by the ways neoliberalism beyond failed us. And the 2016 election, the drastic response to that, and the anger like that caused me to nitpick at people posturing as feminists and writing books like Lean In or Sophia Amoruso or whatever. Like just the intensity of me nitpicking about how their feminism wasn't perfect was in some ways valid, in some ways a coping mechanism. And now I've kind of almost landed somewhere, not entirely in the middle, but like it's a combination of focusing on broader systemic factors that benefit the collective, but also like playing the game.
Yeah.
Like there's kind of no way around playing the game to a degree because if the goal, I mean, a broader theme of this book, I feel like is each chapter is kind of getting at a way to improve financial outcomes for women without doing more work than you already are, right?
Yes, right. It's like my thing is I want you to earn more and get more out of the things that you are already doing. And I think there are a lot of arenas in finance where there are very small tweaks that actually do have outsized impacts. Another example of this is what I talk about in chapter 6, which is tax advantaged investing, and how simply saving and investing in like this bucket versus that one, because of the way that compounding returns work and how taxes work, you will literally retire 15% faster. So those are the like shortcuts that I'm talking about, because ultimately, when I look at my own journey and what enabled me to start thinking bigger and to start becoming politically engaged and outspoken and to start trying to understand, okay, how could we actually build a better economy? How could we build better businesses, better families? Like, what does that look like? It was only because I had financial stability. It was only because I finally had money. So like I could make decisions without money being the number one factor. And so I hope that people, when they read Rich Girl Nation, and the things that they take away from it is, you know, doing good work, being paid well for it, investing for my future. You're not a sellout. You're just doing the things that you need to do to give yourself as much capacity as possible so you actually can have a positive impact on your sphere of influence, whatever that may be, big or small. But I really believe that, like, when I think about the future and what is going to save us, I mean, it is the collective. It is all of us coming together. And I think that there are so many people right now for whom they feel like so spread thin, and like they're so concerned about just the end of the month that they can't think about next year. They can't think about 10 years from now.
Right.
They don't have that luxury. They don't have that privilege. And so it's not that investing advice and negotiation advice is going to solve that problem for everybody. It won't. And I want to be very honest about the limited utility of this advice, that in many ways it is still for people who have, you know, decent incomes and are not exploited low wage workers. I mean, those things do require systemic solutions. There's no way around it. But I do think that we can continue to build power together by essentially like enhancing our own financial stability. And then again, I see it as a responsibility that we have to bring other people along with us. Like, it's not enough to get it for yourself and then be like, cool, I'm good. Like, you
Right,
you do
right.
need to share this with other people. You do need to help other people, whether that's with the knowledge or with your own money, or however it looks like for you. But I do believe that we have a responsibility to other humans.
And so much of it was very enlightening, I think, and I hope like younger women read this too, because even just you spelling out that like just factually, like women outlive men, but often with like a third of the assets, or the
Yeah.
likelihood of finding oneself in poverty after divorce relative to male counterparts is like in protecting yourself. You have a chapter on prenups, you have a chapter on all moms are working moms. I mean, you really cover so many unique aspects of women's experiences with money and to money, that are so important to factor in, that it's not just about like women be shopping, I want to buy more shit. It's like securing yourself to a place where you have freedom, where you have options, where you're not stuck, and where you're safe.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've read a lot of personal finance books. I've been in the space for like half a decade now. So I am extremely familiar with what was out there and kind of how we talk about these things. And obviously I've spent a lot of time in the data and trying to understand how women end up in these, not so great positions and financial situations. And something that really jumped out at me was just how striking it was that so few finance books talked about marriage or caregiving. Because, like,
Hmm.
it truly is the most impactful, like, by a long shot, and it's not close, the most impactful thing on like a woman's ability to earn, save, and invest. So the fact that there was rarely, if ever, conversations about how marriage is going to change your finances, or what should be in a prenuptial agreement, or if you're going to work inside your home instead of outside it, what kind of legal protections do you need to have? I mean, it just kind of struck me as like very common sense given what we know about women's outcomes. Women are 65% more likely to leave paid work to care for a family member. There are no Social Security credits for caregivers. I mean, it's on the docket. I don't know if it'll pass, but like that's not a thing. So if you aren't working for a paycheck and you're working inside your home for decades, like not only are you not getting an opportunity to save for your own retirement, but you don't get your own Social Security either. Like you'll probably get some of your partners, but even that, there's like weirdness around how that is meted out later. So
Yeah.
yeah, I really wanted to get into the caregiving gap and the domestic labor gap and just how money functions in marriage, how to manage money together, because those things felt like to me just as, if not more important than like, here's how you buy an index fund.
And so much marital money advice is about it's so much focus on what's shared, which is fair. But I think there's an element of self-protection that's not discussed enough. And it's just more like people being reprimanded for not like sharing joint accounts for everything or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and I just thought you had a really refreshing and interesting take. Wait, did you say in this, I forget, do you have a prenup?
I don't know. That was kind of the joke. Is like I have this very extensive section about prenups where I'm like, you need this. Like, everyone's marriage is a contract. Do you want the opportunity to influence it or not? Yada, yada, yada. And then I have this big reveal of like, you're probably thinking, like, man, I've never encountered a woman so excited about contract law. I bet her prenup is amazing. And then I'm like, but I don't have one. And the reason I don't have one is because even though my husband, who is an attorney, and I had had discussions while we were dating and engaged of like, yeah, prenups make sense. We're definitely going to do it. We just like never got around to it. We got married when we were 26, and I didn't fully grasp at the time how important it was beyond just like a superficial understanding. And so I want other women to have a deeper understanding of like, this is exactly what it can do for you. It can outline terms about spousal support if you become a stay-at-home parent, because that's going to be tough to get if you go in front of a judge in a state that's not super friendly to stay-at-home parents. And that like you can make it whatever you want it to be, but I didn't realize this when I got married, and I don't think many people do, because there's no natural stopping point when you are getting married where anyone like sits you down and explains to you how this is going to change your legal and financial rights, which is crazy if you think about the fact that you're literally signing a lifelong legally enforceable contract. There's nothing to read. That's nuts. So I don't think many people realize it, that
But
when
you're
you get
so right. Yeah, you at the ceremony, you like sign something you literally like haven't
a
read.
lifelong legally binding contract with nothing to read, it's
Like
nuts.
I'm sure this
So
is pretty
it's
standard.
insane. Yeah.
Oh
And
my
so, but
God.
it doesn't, you don't, nobody gets, like, people don't know that from the date of marriage, anything that either of you earn, borrow, or buy is looked at by the state as belonging to both of you. So, my only kind of point to people is, if you want to keep your finances separate, that is okay. But just remember that that separation, absent a prenup, is probably a little bit of an illusion, because if you split up and you're in a community property state, or I mean, honestly, equitable distribution state, you're going to see this, but in a less extreme sense. Like, the court is going to look at all that shit as both of yours. So if you're saving and investing diligently and like you're on top of it and you have no idea what the fuck your spouse is doing, and they're just kind of, going along to get along, forwarding all their paychecks to DraftKings, like, they're probably going to be legally entitled to half your 401k. So it pays to get on the same page so that even if you are managing money separately, like, you are protected. And I just don't think that there's a better or more romantic time to have that conversation than at the outset of a relationship and the outset of a marriage, when like you both can do something very selfless for one another and say, I want you to have this in life, even if it's not with me someday. Like, that is so beautiful, so much more beautiful than, okay, well, you signed on the dotted line, so fuck it, we ball, hope for the best, swallow the key.
That is such a good point. And such a way to get around what I think is the hardest part about this conversation, which is that it's deemed unromantic to
Hmm.
talk about splitting up when your life is just starting together. But what a profound respect for someone you love to say, I want you to be okay, whether it's with me or
Hmm.
not. That
Yeah.
was
And I know you'll
that was
want me to be okay too. Like, yeah, I mean, you just never know. I think obviously nobody gets married with the intention to get divorced, but things happen. I mean, I've heard stories from women whose husbands had essentially like severe psychotic breakdowns. And I mean that in the like medical sense, not in the like colloquial sense, where mental health issues arise. I mean, people can really change, not because they even mean to,
Hmm.
but a lot, some of this just truly is outside of your control. And I think I look at it as common sense. And, for someone like me who like didn't have the prenup and didn't understand enough when she got married what she was really agreeing to, you can do a postnup. And they do tend to have more issues with enforceability. It does depend on your state. So, both of you need to be working with your own legal representation. You need to work with real attorneys who really understand the family law in your state. But I just think it's vitally important that women kind of understand, men too, understand legally what's happening to them so they can make the best choices for themselves. I mean, I talk to people too who choose not to get married because they don't want to introduce this level of legal and state, not interference, but like they don't want a contract. And that's okay
Mm,
too. And,
yeah.
maybe once you know what that contract entails, you're going to opt not to sign it, and that's fine. But knowledge is power.
There was this something you cited, maybe it was in the intro, that like the statistics are worse now than in 1992 in terms of financial literacy. Why do you think
Yeah,
that is?
it's it's how many couples report. It's from the UBS Know Your Worth study. I think this one came from 2021. How many couples report the husband heterosexual? This is a mixed sex couple study. How many couples report the husband taking charge of all the financial decisions and the financial long-term planning? And I think it's something like 56% in 2021 reported that compared to 53% in 1992. I don't know why that
Fascinating.
is. I really don't. I have no, I couldn't even begin to tell you why or how that's getting worse. Um, but what was really interesting to me about that study was that 30% of women reported that they were the main financial decision makers in their homes, and only 11% of men reported that their wives were the
Huh.
main decision maker. So I was like, there is this weird two-way mirror thing happening where like even in situations where women were reporting that they were the primary, like fewer men were comfortable admitting that. So I'm sure there's something like weird and gender dynamic-y going on there that will probably is probably even worse now in 2025 than it was in 2021. But it was something like 1 in 5 couples reported making these decisions equally. And
Hmm.
that's scary because, like we said, women live longer, 6.5% longer on average. They are more likely to bear the brunt of poor long-term financial planning than their spouses. Just again, if we're looking at the actuarial tables and the cold hard data. So you gotta be involved. And like I get why women aren't though. Like I want to say that because it's not about intelligence, it's not about competence, it's not about one gender being naturally more, math friendly than the other. But I think that this too is connected to the caregiving gap. Because if you think about the fact that women do an hour more of unpaid labor in their homes every day, and you have a partner who, like, maybe does actually at this point in time know more about it than you do, who's saying, hey, that thing that you don't know anything about yet, that you're not really into or interested in, I can take that off your hands and manage it end to end, and you don't have to think about it. Most women are going to be like, fucking great, thanks. Can we
Yeah.
apply that attitude to more things, actually? So, like, it makes perfect sense to me that you would take somebody up on that offer, and that offer is probably being made in good faith. Like, I don't think that, like, men are malevolent creatures out here trying to dupe you out of your wealth, but it's just the reality that like when marriages end and men are the ones that have been in charge of the finances the whole time, you're going to find yourself in a not so good situation. And we know that that's true. I think it's something like 75% of women who either get divorced or are widowed report finding a negative financial surprise. And so, like, I don't know,
Mm.
I can personally think of no worse time to find out that my finances are not what I thought they were than when I am going through and grieving a traumatic life event.
Right. And to your point, people need to go easy on themselves because if you've never, financial literacy isn't, it's not something that should come naturally to you. It's something you have to put a concerted amount of effort into learning and self-teaching if you didn't have a formal education surrounding it. And I think me talking about my money noise and issues last time you were on the pod, I think a lot of like my avoidance is grounded in I like to feel competent.
Mm-hmm.
And I know so much about so many things, but it's just an area that I've never had a formal education in or spent a lot of time with. And who I honest to God think about all the time is Teresa Giudici. Not that I'm a,
Say
diehard fan of
more,
hers, but
Kate.
I think that like there's a lot of situations where you don't even know what you're signing or signing up for, and you're defaulting to somebody who claims to know more than you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good point. I mean, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but like there is a book called Pound Foolish by a woman named Helene Olin, and she does sort of myth bust this idea that it's tricky because it is true that men like these sorts of decisions are abdicated to men more often. It's more common for a woman to abdicate to a man than vice versa within like household finances. We know that that's true. But when you actually compare rates of financial literacy, like the actual knowledge, there's not a very big gender gap actually. I mean,
Yeah.
there's slightly a gender gap, but it's pretty small, like a couple percentage points at most. And so her point in this book was basically like it's actually a myth that men know more about money than women do, which
Hmm.
I think is really interesting because again, we like kind of culturally assume that this is like a man's, at least that's the message that I received, as a not from my
Yeah,
parents
provider.
really, but just like the provider narrative. Yeah, that like money is a man's thing. And like you see these dynamics even in relationships where the women are the financial breadwinners. Like you still, this is true even for high earning millennial women who are the primary or sole earners in their homes. So it's interesting. It's interesting for sure.
I mean, truly, guys, this book it is fascinating. It's funny. It like beyond like we talked about with like prenup or saving for childcare. Like she is, retiring independently in a tax optimized way. She's talking through tax loopholes in one breath and making a pop culture reference in another. And it is not an easy feat to get me to read cover to cover a book about a topic that I claimed to
Oh,
have so little interest in. And you belong in this position to make this topic approachable and empowering for women. And I just want the Dave Ramseys of the world to get off my nuts about my cups of coffee and to be have like practical, helpful advice. And this book is full of it. And the thing I like to ask authors as a person who promoted a book, like, if is there any part of it or a tidbit or something that like you don't get asked about enough that you wish you got asked about, or something that like you love
oh.
talking about in this book? Because interviewers kind of always ask you about the same stuff or hot topics, right? And but I feel like,
That's a good question. Something that I wish we would have talked about that. Honestly, there's nothing that's coming to mind immediately, but I do think that I have been spending a lot of time thinking about um what's next and what I want to write next. And I feel good now that I have this kind of like how to book out in the world where I'm kind of explaining like if you want to know how to manage your money and not just manage it in like from the basics, but you want to go advanced, you want to know the 505 of money, like this is what you should read and you're going to learn it all and you're going to have everything you need. I'm happy that I've done that now because now I feel like I can kind of move on from being the how-to girl and like I have this artifact
Andy
now that someone
Anderson,
can
How
buy
to
it
Grow.
like now I have this artifact that like everybody can buy and read and benefit from, but I really want to write a book of essays next because I really enjoy writing essays. I really enjoy the type of writing that isn't necessarily offering solutions or answers, but is just trying to get you to kind of think about the world differently and um, imparting insights maybe that are going to stick with you. And so I really enjoy writing about culture and capitalism and like the interplay between these two things. I guess you could say I'm the dreaded cultural Marxist that all the right-wing Twitter anons love to hate. But I just think that like there are such interesting dynamics between culture, the economy, and politics. And I am excited now that I think I can kind of move more fully into that space.
I absolutely. It's kind of like this is what got you in to the public square and more how-to prescriptive information. It's like kind of your financial advice magnum opus you put out there. And
Hmm.
now what that information and self-teaching over the years and expertise has allowed you to do is make really astute connections when you're doing
Mm.
cultural analysis that I think different people can bring different things to the table by the field that they understand. And I think having that financial and political overlay, especially that you and Caro are able to bring to the table, and talking about feminism and talking about cultural phenomenons, like it's invaluable, and it forces me to grow and learn. And I just think you're brilliant. And
thanks,
I will devour your next book of essays, and hopefully you'll come back to be there in 5. But where can people
Likewise.
find you? All the things.
Oh, thank you. Well, if you like podcasts, you might like the Money with Katie show. I think you'll really like Diabolical Lies if you like Be There in 5. Obviously the book. I'm on moneywithkatie.com, and then Money with Katie on Instagram as well. So I will like randomly take hiatuses from Instagram because I think it's an exhausting platform. But lately I've been on a posting spree, so come hang out.
Gotta love the self-promo season. Oh my gosh. Been there.
Yes. Thank you so much
you,
for having me,
Katie.
though. It's been so fun to come back.
Oh my gosh, of course. And sometime I need to have you and Caro on and do a proper crossover, because I get requests for it all the time.
Really?
But next time, much like your career trajectory, we'll go into
I
cultural
love it.
combos.
I love it.
Thank
Okay,
you
I'll
for
talk
giving
to
me
you
so much of your
soon.
time. Bye.
Oh, dude, the best. You're so fun. Bye.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Loved having Katie back on. It was so good to catch up with her. We'll have to do a Diabolical Lies proper crossover sometime. And otherwise, I hope you're hanging in there. And I'll be back next week, hopefully to talk about something delightfully mind-numbing in these trying times. Because this week was a doozy. And now, by the time I've recorded this, the whole Camp Mystic situation, you guys, I am beside it's just so sad. That's like literally all I can think about. Also, if you listen to the DCC ep, I explained, I did some more BTS behind the scenes, and I hate saying that. Honestly, I don't feel like if you're over 35, you can pull off talking about spilling tea, but there's some fun stuff on there. And then I also weirdly go into a snorkel about me really, really thinking about how interesting it is that You're Losing Me was written December 5th, 2021. And when you contextualize that with Red Taylor's version coming out in November 2021, I don't know. I was thinking about how I think that there was a much earlier breakup and how that relates to a lot of things done in 2021. And also songs like Renegade and stuff. I think it loosely ties to the Grammy attribution. I don't know, you guys, just spitballing. I think the problem is, even when she's not doing anything, I'm still constantly thinking about Taylor Swift. Why is that? Do you guys have this problem too? So that's what Nora Princiati and I were talking about. Like, why do we think we're friends? But I was hoping we'd see some Tamerica footage this year, but no luck. So yeah, that's on Patreon. The one before that, I think, talking about Alex Cooper's documentary, Paige DeSorbo's like Daphne line, Sabrina Carpenter, among other things. So yeah, if you ever want more content, don't forget to check out patreon.com/BeThereIn5. Anyway, you guys, thank you for being here, and I will catch you next week. And as always, let me know your thoughts and I'll let you know mine. I'll be there in 5, I swear.